We're going to get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts, and I'm super excited to be here for our Kiwi Author Fest with Stephanie Ruth, Esme Brett, and Courtney Clark Michaels, all coming to us at like the ungodly hour of 8 a.m. in New Zealand to be chatting about their books and publishing and anything we could possibly imagine. So before we get to them, I just want to say a quick thank you to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs, and to our authors who agreed to let us share this program with other libraries, because of course, when libraries work together, we make magic. Not romantasy magic, just regular library magic. I'm glad that people are putting in like USA, so we all know that what country you're from. So you can buy books from any of our authors on their websites. I'll send their website links out to you in an email after our program. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your screen. And if you want to chat with each other, feel free to do that through the chat. We'll be paying attention to both. So without further ado, because like I said, I do know that everybody wants to hear from our authors, I'm just going to go right into asking you to tell us a little bit about yourselves, and then maybe about your latest book. So Stephanie, you're at the top of my Zoom screen. I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and
Kia ora. Kia ora, which is hi, hello, and be well. And I'm from Aotearoa, which is in Te Waiponamu, the South Island of Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I write slow burn, multicultural, contemporary Kiwi romance, and set in Aotearoa, New Zealand, or about people from here. Kia ora.
Thank you. And Esme.
Kia ora. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Mina and the Ashland Public Library, for having us. We're super excited to be here, and thank you, Sam, for the idea too. I'm going to introduce myself quite thoroughly. So in Māori culture, introductions involve saying your family names and the places you're from. And this is a really small island. So the purpose is literally always because you will know someone in common. I promise I won't list every auntie and uncle that I have, because I know that you will not know them. But I want you to understand that it's the spirit behind what I'm doing, and the purpose is so that you can know me better. So I would start by saying kia ora koutou, which is hi to you all. Ko Esme Brett, tōku ingoa. My name is Esme. Ko Takitimu tōku waka. My Indigenous ancestors came here on a boat named Takitimu in about 1200 AD. My Scottish ancestors came here on a boat, also named after a man, John something, in about 1840. So I have mixed heritage, but boats named after men in common. Ko Kaitahu tōku iwi. My tribe is Ngai Tahu. No Aotearoa te kāinga aho. I live in Aotearoa, New Zealand. You might have heard us say Aotearoa. That's the Māori name for New Zealand. It means the land of the long white cloud. And hey, kai tuhi aho. I am a writer. What I don't know how to say in today is that I write spicy rom-coms that are horny, heartfelt, and hilarious. And I'm really excited to be here today. So that's my introduction.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. I have to say, like, ever since I have invited you all to do this, I have learned so much about New Zealand and a little bit about the Indigenous, but like you've really taught me so much. Courtney, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your latest book, maybe.
Kia ora koutou, ko Courtney tōku ingoa. My name is Courtney Clark Michaels, and I I'm also from New Zealand. I was born in Aotearoa, like Steph, and now I live in Waihakariri, which is in Marlborough, which is one of our primary wine growing regions. And I write messy, steamy romance set in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the South Pacific. And my latest book is Single Dad for the Runaway Bride, which is my latest standalone, about a reality TV dating star who runs away from her fiance at the altar and ends up nannying in a Samoan resort for the single dad owner. But of course, my latest release is with these beautiful wahine, these beautiful ladies, and it was our New Year's Eve anthology, All That Glitters.
I will be asking about the anthologies in a second. Esme, I want to start with you about because we have such a mixed crowd of people here in the US and in New Zealand. What was reading like for you growing up? Did you have plenty? And I'm just making assumptions here. Just feel free to let me know if I'm being like incredibly culturally insensitive. But did you have what you wanted to read when you were a kid, and what did you read? And then at what point did you decide you want to be a writer?
So I definitely didn't have access to like romance novels growing up here in Aotearoa. There would be some Mills and Boon, some category romances in secondhand shops, and maybe like three in a bookshop. But I didn't really realize, because you don't know what's different for you when that's all you know, until a friend of mine who's American like was talking about going to Walmart, and like there's just stacks and stacks of romance novels. Until like little 10-year-old me, I was like, you are living the dream. Like, what do you mean? You don't have to steal your grandmother's Mills and Boon to read romance? Holy moly. Um, and so when I fell into fanfiction.net as a 13-year-old, I fell hard because there's a lot of intersection between romance and fanfic, and
Mhm.
lots of the tropes that are used. And so that was my sort of gateway into reading the stuff I really wanted to read, and then eventually writing the stuff that I really wanted to read. And I will say there's more like market romance available now, but there certainly wasn't when I was growing up. I don't know about for you, Steph and Courtney, if it's the same.
Courtney, how about you?
I grew up in a house full of books, but there wasn't a lot of romance, and the romance that was around was kind of hidden under my sister's bed, and so I did discover that quite early, and that was great. So yeah, thank you to my to our kanaria, my older sister. I won't name her, but she knows who she is. I did find romance in my parents' stash too, but it was under the guise of Lucy Walker's and Georgette Hayes, and so there was quite a bit of I would say historical romance. And the Lucy Walker is an Australian romance writer from the, I would want to say, 50s. So very closed door, stayed, but I loved the escapism, not just into the romance, but into the place. So I think that's part of the reason why I write the way I write, where it's deep into the place of Aotearoa, where I am, because I love that descriptive escapism.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Court?
Oh, so my mum was a Mills and Boon sexy reader, like straight off the bat, the red covers. Shout out to my mum. But we like the others. I grew up in a house with a lot of books, a lot of reading, a lot of emphasis on reading, and reading for escapism and reading for pleasure. And so that was a really natural progression for me. I read a lot growing up as a child, to the extent where I like was very socially removed in situations, because I'd just take a book and head off in the corner. And then when I was about 13, I just started grabbing mums from the side of the bed, the library books, always from our public library. Mm-hmm. So that was it. And so we would get, 4 or so new ones a month when we lived in the country. So we had to go into town every week or so to go to the library, and mum would swap out a couple and I'd read them when she was done. But I do remember one of them very, very early on in my Harlequin Mills and Boon reading era was set in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and it talks specifically about the Hauraki Gulf. So it was up in Auckland. And I remember being a little bit sort of taken aback that books were being set here, because that wasn't something I had seen very much of at all. And if I had, it was something like The Halfman of O by Morris G, which is an amazing young adults fantasy novel, but certainly nothing in the contemporary space, in the contemporary romance space. And so that was huge for me, and it actually devastates me that I can't remember book or the author. But again, I was just powering through them. But yeah, so once I started reading those, I started writing sex scenes specifically to entertain people in school. And then and then I went on to live the rest of my life, but it was always sort of in the back of my mind. Like I continued to read and I continued to read romance the whole time. And then I started with the encouragement of my really good friend, Barbara Dillio, who's an amazing New Zealand author as well. We love Barb. And she said to me, she's like, she was doing it. And I said, I'd love to do it. And she said, do it. She said, if you write one, I'll read it. And I was like, okay. And went home and started a book that still languishes in my hard drive where it belongs.
So funny. So when you all started first writing then, and trying to publish, or here at least publishing, it can be a pretty hard road. Did you find it to be difficult over there as well to get your books into the hands of readers, Stephanie?
Yes. So I originally tried to go down the traditional route or route, wherever you're from, and I had some success with agents' interest, and I found that the underlying message invariably was, could you remove New Zealand from this? Could you take Aotearoa out of this writing so that it's more accessible to the US? Because the majority of the agents who were interested in my work were from the US, and
can I interrupt you for a second? Because earlier you and I were talking about this, is that they also asked you to almost dumb it down, like keep it to like 8th grade school level.
They did. And I wasn't sure if I should say that, but yeah, they did.
No, because I want to ask in the audience, like you all, if you're in the US, would that be a preference for you to have a book that was written at an 8th grade, like dumbed down? Go ahead, Stephanie. Sorry.
That's right. Yeah. So certainly, me as a reader, I wouldn't want that, and I was under the expectation that there would be other readers like me who, if you want to read an Indian author, you want to be transported to India, or if you want to read someone from the UK, you want to be transported there. So I was under that assumption, and I found through self-publishing that there absolutely is a market for it, and actually people are hungry for Aotearoa, and they should be, because it is a magnificent place. I've lived all over the world, and I was desperate to come back here. So yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you didn't listen to them. Esme. How about you, Esme? Did you what was your publishing journey like?
When I was, 16, staying up all night writing fanfic in my parents' sleep out, I so desperately wanted to be traditionally published, and I had never read a story at that point. I had never read something in my genre written by a New Zealand writer. There was like a healthy New Zealand publishing industry, but no romance. And so I just did not think that was possible. And I remember sobbing to my dad about it. And he's got no interest in like the publishing ecosystem. My dad's a truck driver, so he didn't really know what I was talking about, but he knew that I was sad about it. And then he had one of those moments of like sublime wisdom that sort of crack through for him sometimes. And I said, he's like, why can't you be a writer if you want to? And I was like, because I'm not American. And he was like, why does that matter? I was like, he doesn't get it. It's so frustrating, Dad. I was like, because the entire like publishing like ecosystem where I want to be is there. And he calls me Peanut. And he goes, don't tell them, Peanut. I was like, what? And he's like, just don't tell anyone where you're from and do what you want to do. And this would have been like, what, 2008? And it was a grain of truth in that I really took. Like, obviously, I can't hide who I am. And to Steph's story, I wouldn't hide who I am. But it made me think, like, why isn't that possible? Like, why does why does where I live feel like a disadvantage to me instead of an advantage? And I can tell these unique stories and I can use my perspective and my, experience in the world to make these things really textured. And I wrote a dad character. My dad's named Dave. Lots of Kiwi dads are called Dave. I wrote a dad character in my book Eye Candy, which was my debut that came out last year, which is about a burlesque artist, a Kiwi, and an ethics blogger, and he's an American, and it takes place mostly in New York City, but there's one scene in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I wrote a dad character, and I pretty much just based him on my dad. Um, and he gives Caroline a very similar pep talk to what my dad gave me. And I have had readers contact me and say, like, Kevin is the best character. I wish my dad was like that. So it makes me delighted that due to my dad's encouragement, I decided I could do this, but also I get to like share him and his random wisdom with readers. It makes me very happy.
Wow. It kind of reminds me of back in the day, way back in the day, when women had to write under men pseudonyms to
Yeah.
get published. And what is more important, to show who you are or to actually get your words out there to the public?
Mm.
That's really interesting.
I still get it sometimes feedback, either in like beta feedback or reviews. I've had feedback before of like, oh, there's a lot of Kiwi words in here, or there's a lot of Kiwiisms. And I'm always interested. When it's beta readers, I always go like, which ones? What do you mean? Because I have so many American beta readers and because it goes through such a process. And I'm very deliberate because I grew up on a lot of American stories. I'm very deliberate when I'm writing in like an American character or a Kiwi character. And I always ask people like, what is that? And there's been times where people said words that they just didn't, like, I was like, that's not a Kiwi word at all. Like, that's just a new to you word. So it's really interesting that sometimes people assume something that is new to them must be specific to New Zealand. And I always feel like you'll know when it's specific to New Zealand. Some of our sayings are so weird, and I often don't put them in because they're quite incomprehensible. But you'll definitely know when it's a uniquely Kiwi saying. Yeah.
Maybe an opportunity to write at that eighth grade level. Sorry. Sorry, American. How about you, Courtney? What was your path?
Um, I'm gonna piggyback on Esme for a sec before I talk about my path, because it's amazing. Because firstly, my dad shows up in my first book too. Well, no, my dad doesn't show up because the dad character in my first book, Pregnant by the Prince, is like a gambling addict and an asshole. But the speech that the main character Stella gives him, like, that's very much inspired by my dad as well. And he read it and he was like, yeah. Exactly. But also it's fascinating we're talking about this right now, because actually yesterday, because I'm a high school teacher in my day job, I was teaching at maths in eighth grade. I was teaching in what would be your eighth grade English class, and we're doing a unit on the Kiwi identity, and we were specifically talking about Kiwi language. And so not only like our specific words, but phrases, which when Esme mentioned it, I thought about some of the phrases that were on the worksheet I had the kids do yesterday. And I was like, oh yeah, no one would get that. That's too obscure. It's too like specific to where we're from and our like lexicon and our vocab. Yeah. So very much we are somewhat careful, and that's been a really interesting thing for me, switching series, because my first series is a Polynesian royal family series. So even things like not using so many contractions because English is a second language and things like that. And then when I switched to the Hot Rugby Night series, which is set all in Aotearoa with people who've grown up here, it's just the joy I felt in being able to really lean into some of that Kiwiism was phenomenal. And that's part of why I also ended up self-publishing, because oh, don't worry, Karen, I'll send you a worksheet. So Pregnant by the Prince, which is my first published book, I actually wrote for Mills and Boon, for Harlequin, and I wrote it as part of their So You Think You Can Write competition that they used to run. And so I sent them off like the first chapter or the first couple of chapters, and they were like, "This is great. We would love to see more of it." So I wrote it, and then I got to the end, and I just did not want American involvement in it, to be honest. And I was very afraid that a similar thing would happen to me that happened to Steph. And Steph and I didn't know each other at this stage, but it's a interracial romance between a Polynesian prince and a Kiwi character, a Kiwi FMC who had a fling at university and then went badly, and then they ended up getting drunk and having wedding sex because at a mutual friend's wedding, what else would you do? It's a very Kiwi thing anyway. And I was very aware that the story was so close to me because the relationship looked like mine and it looked like my friends' relationships. And I had not seen that very much at all in the romance sphere. And if I did, the Polynesian characters were usually Hawaiian, which of course has an American aspect or slant to it. And I just didn't want anyone else to put their hands on it and change this story that was so important to me because it looked like, at its very core, not obviously the fantastical or romantic elements of it, but at its core, it looked like a story that looked like mine, that looked like my friends, that looked like the stories that my children might grow up and see themselves represented in. And I just thought, no, this is my first book. I've written it, the story I want to tell, and I want to tell this story the way that it is. Mm-hmm. So I actually never even sent them the full. In the end, I thought, no, this is for me. And so I published it.
Excellent. So glad you did.
Me too.
Esme,
Plus, I knew they would make me take out, I knew Harlequin specifically would make me take out all the swear words.
Yeah. Esme, your response to Karen went only to hosts and panelists if you want to send that again to everyone. Okay, so now that you've been published, let's say, did you find that your audience was mostly in New Zealand, or were you able to create a worldwide audience? I mean, the world is so interconnected now with social media and, the internet or interweb, as some people call it, and, travel is relatively easy. So my perception is it's relatively easy, but I don't know if that's actually what happened for you. And Esme, I'm going to start with you this time.
So, sorry, can you recap the question for me? I was busy thinking about how I couldn't operate Zoom. Sorry, Mina.
It's okay. I think you got it. So I was asking if you found that you had a worldwide audience when you really did start pushing your books, and if not, if they were more New Zealand and then it captured attention elsewhere after a while.
I started in Bookstagram and BookTok as a book enthusiast and a sometimes reviewer, which I don't review anymore, but I still am active on those platforms. So I had a really lovely intro to the space in that I was able to make heaps of friends who liked the same kind of things that I did, and then try and sort of share my writing. But I'd say it's a constant challenge, and self-promotion does not necessarily come easily to New Zealanders, and anyone who sees my Instagram might think I'm absolutely lying here, but I do. It does not feel natural to me to promote my work. For example, the first 3 podcasts I did, I forgot to mention that I write books or what they are. I'm a constant risk of that. And so it does feel sometimes like the market is very not intuitive for me. But the great thing is that I love talking about my books and I love these stories and I love finding people who read the same books I do and love the same, because I just did not have that as a young person. So it really does make all the difference to me. And I certainly I'm really taking a Pokemon approach of trying to make catch them all, make as many friends who love what I love as I possibly can, and grow that romance ecosystem. And sometimes it's a real mission, and I feel I do sometimes feel like I'm writing outside of what is to market, but It's a fun challenge. It's a good challenge, yeah.
How about you, Stephanie?
Yeah, just to recap what Esme was saying, that outside of market is actually kind of what we are, without meaning to be. If we're writing what we want to read, then we are outside of general market. But everybody had to be that at one point before that becomes general market. And it's been really interesting watching sales, because my market is generally, I have a little bit of Germany, a little bit of UK, a little bit of Australia, which is hard to define because Amazon.au is, so that can be Australia and New Zealand. So we've been combined as Oceania, but the majority is from the States. So I'm going like, I was right, like Courtney, to go, I'm not setting my original book, my first book is called Mako Bay, and it's set in Otago, which is down south in Te Waiponamu, which is the South Island, and it's about a Kiwi surfer who is coming to terms with his father's death and his roots, which are Maori, and so it's a second chance romance. But I was asked to remove the Kiwi content and set it in Hawaii or Hawaiki, and like Courtney realized, actually this is too close to my heart and too much what I would like to read. There must be somebody else out there who would like to read something that's written by a New Zealander, set in New Zealand, about Aotearoa and the multicultural people that I know. So, and looking at sales, that's absolutely true. And read through too. So it's not just read the first book in series, but people will read through. So clearly, I think if I was living in America, to be polite, I would like a little bit of escapism right now too. So I'm happy to help. But yeah, so surprisingly, I find that most, or maybe not surprisingly, just because you're such voracious readers, but yeah, the States.
Okay. Yeah, we are definitely voracious readers, and I'm a huge fan of series. I love revisiting old characters or previous characters, and I have to read everything in order. Enough about me. Courtney, please answer the question too.
Well, like it's really similar, to be honest. The majority of my market is the States, and I'm happy that readers in the US find me, in Canada and everything like that, because when you grow up in a small town in Aotearoa, for many of us, the only way we could experience these cultures and these cities and these different places in the world was through books, and that's what I did. I was reading books set in the US, in the UK, in Europe, and and all across the world, and I still am. I'm loving seeing the Southeast Asian romance genre just take off, and like it's still giving me an opportunity to experience different places, different cultures, different types of relationships, and that's still something that I'm drawn to as a reader. And so while I'm writing the books that I want to read and the characters that I love in the world that I know, I'm doing it very much through choice, but it brings me a great deal of pleasure to think that other people might be getting that from my work, that I can give them a taste of Aotearoa or a taste of the Pacific Islands that they might not get to experience otherwise. And that's just, yeah, I'm just happy. I'm happy that books, like Esme said, it brings people together, and it brings people who share and joy, particularly in the romance genre, together. And that's how I found Esme. I followed her on her Bookstagram, and I was like, oh my God, this girl is so cool. Oh my God. I was very intimidated by how cool she was. And then I was like, I was going to say stoked, but no one would know. I was thrilled to discover that she was a Kiwi. And I was like, oh my God, this girl is so cool. And she's from here. And because that wasn't something that was immediately apparent in the reviews and the work that she was doing, and she was doing beautiful work under the handle feminist romance, which is something that I really was really drawn to. And so the idea that this place not only brings readers together, but has brought us together, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I'm thrilled to have a part in sharing it with other people.
That's amazing. I'm gonna come back to that in a second because I know you've written anthologies, the three of you together. But I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but one of my very favorite authors in the world is Nalini Singh. I'm actually interviewing her in May after Archangel's Ascensions comes out, and we're going to talk about spoilers. Serious.
I'm interviewing her soon too, but it's a secret and I'm not supposed to say it.
What? Are you going? Oh, okay. I'm not going to get sidetracked. Nope.
No details. No of these details yet.
Wow. Yes, I'm gonna have to talk to you more, Courtney, in a little bit because I do. Whatever. I'm a huge fan. Anyways, do you think for you there has been a Nalini effect? Just like for historical romance, there's been a Bridgerton effect. So since Nalini is very popular throughout the world, do you think that there was more understanding that there are really good authors in other places in the US and people started finding you more because of somebody who really came out of New Zealand and was as well known, Stephanie?
Yeah, potentially. So less in the Archangel series, but she also has a contemporary romance series, and the rugby characters, for example, Gabriel, I just remember his name because he happens to be a favorite of mine, but Gabriel in one of her first contemporary romance series was rugby and was really well received, and you would have seen a flush of rugby heroes or MFs at that point. Yeah, some MMs, lots of MFs as well, coming out at that point, not necessarily because they were following in Nalini's steps, but because we're New Zealanders, so we do have rugby within our culture, and a lot of sportsmen within our culture, and sportswomen as well, who are fabulous. If you've watched the New Zealand women's rugby team, they're amazing. And so it wasn't necessarily because Nalini had written a rugby character, but it's because all of these writers were suddenly picked up by readers who were saying, wow, this rugby character was fantastic. I loved it. I'm going to hunt rugby. And suddenly all of these underlings like me, for example, who had a rugby character in their books was picked up and ran with it. So that was really interesting. And I think all of us look up to Nalini. She's absolutely amazing, not just because of how she writes, but how absolutely giving she is to all the other writers around her. So she's a real gift to us. And when we're at WNZ conferences, Romance Writers of New Zealand, and RWA, she goes to 2.0 sometimes, she's just gives so much of herself to pull people up, to pull others up around her. So yeah, I would absolutely say that she's a pivotal point in romance writing in New Zealand and Aotearoa, but it's hard to say what came first, the chicken or the egg, but we absolutely love her. She's a national treasure. And I send love to her.
How about you, Courtney? What did you see a bump in your sales once people realized that you and Nalini were both from New Zealand?
No. I come well after Nalini. Like, she was very, very established by the time that I came along. But again, the kindest person, and like so welcoming when I did start taking those first steps into the industry here. And actually gave me the best writing advice of my career, which is, I'm going to share it with all of you because I know she would be okay with that. Put your phone on Do Not Disturb. I messaged her and I was like, oh God, Nalini, I tried it and it was actually really amazing. She's like, I told you. But yeah, yeah. And I think part of it is because although Nalini's contemporaries are fabulous, and I love her contemporaries, I started with her contemporaries, and my favorite is Rebel Heart, just in case anyone wants a shout out. She is much more well known for the Guild Hunter and the Psy Changeling series, which of course don't have that Aotearoa context. What I will say is that a big difference for my sales, particularly my rugby sales, was the Olympics last year, actually, and specifically the female teams. So like Alona Ma and all the amazing work that she is doing around women's sports and, you know, the physicality of women's sports. And I've been lucky enough to know some female sevens players here, and I've taught women who've gone on to represent our country and win Olympic gold in rugby sevens. And so to see the excitement for something that Steph says is basically just like, you know, baked into our culture, and to be able to set that within the New Zealand sphere, and have people receive it well, has been really exciting for me. But more exciting for me is the fact that because there's a tendency to celebrate men's success in rugby more heavily than females, even though technically our female national rugby team has more success at world championships than our men's. So to have that be a driving force in people seeking out rugby romance specifically has been so exciting for me to see. And just the rise of sports romance with female professional athletes has been great. I was inspired to write my rugby league series by Amy Andrews, who is an Australian author who has an amazing rugby series there called the Sydney Smoke series. And I like that it's the kind of thing that you can sort of pass on, you know, to the next generation. And I like that maybe someone finds rugby and then finds my books, and maybe they get into it and they want to write their own, or it gives them a new sport to enjoy or a new sport to play. You know, there's such a rise in women's rugby and women's rugby league, particularly in Aotearoa in Australia. And I'm not a fan of rugby myself, hugely. My husband played for a long time, but I'm like, it's okay. It's okay to watch. I'm basically here for the hot chips on the sidelines.
I think we all are.
Just giving people a piece of, you know, our culture there as well.
So Lisa mentions that it's very much like U.S. women's soccer, and I think basketball as well, which women are doing much better, sales are higher, but yet they're still not being treated right. Esme, how about you? Did you, what things did affect your sales? Nalini, soccer, rugby, body positivity is a big part of your writing.
Definitely not sport. I can't say that I am a sports writer or that you'll be seeing a sport romance from me soon. I barely know which way of the field pitch arena is up. But I enjoy watching women's sport more. I watched my first like women's rugby game and I was like, okay, maybe I could get into this. But as Steph and Courtney have said, like it's such a cultural cornerstone in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I just always resented having to watch the rugby games, and I'd be there with my book being like, it's dumb, I want to read my books. So yeah, it's hard to determine like things like that have impact on sales. And like Courtney said, it's interesting about the Olympics having an impact, and sometimes I'm not very good at jumping on the relevant topical things because I'm marching to the beat of what I want to write lots of the time. And you mentioned body positivity. So my most recent my most recent novella was in an anthology with these two lovely wahine women. And it was about a plus size model and a sort of Playboy CEO dude. And that story was very dear to my heart. Perry was as the female main character. She became very dear to my heart, but the idea came from something that happened to me. Which was that I went to a casting as an actor, and I'd sent in a tape audition, and they were really enthusiastic. It was for a company that I was really excited about, like a company that I actually used their products. I was so excited to be hawking them and paid for that. It's not a lot of paying work in that space, so I was stoked. And then I got there, and they looked me up and down and recast me on the spot. Um, because yeah, they decided I was too plus size or not the right kind of plus size, or who knows. But I remember just being like, oh, this sucks, but it'll be good for a book one day. Like maybe. So yeah, I put that in Midnight Kisses, and it happens to Perry, and she handles it with much more aplomb and grace than I did.
I don't know if there's
love Perry. Oh, can we swear?
Yeah, good. Yeah. We're yes.
I fucking love Perry. But I actually think just I actually think the biggest impact on our sales, and I'd be interested to know if the other two agree with us, was COVID. I know it had a huge impact on romance sales around the world, and good for us. But there's an extra level of escapism that comes with reading stories that come from a far-flung place, and because the majority of our readers are American, and because America's response and the impact of COVID on America was very different to what we experienced here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I think actually that when it comes to getting us in front of people, we have the big hitters. We have Nalini, we have some amazing, huge names. Soraya Lane, people like Natalie Anderson and Sue Mackay have written like 50 plus books for Harlequin, and the Spa Girls, all of their incredible work. We have big hitters in the genre, but I think the number one thing is that people use books and they use romance as a way to escape, whatever that is. And we're lucky enough in that as the genre's developed, and as we've developed as writers, and the readers have developed, that we're able to also use them as learning tools and way to explore really difficult, like social or health related, just bigger issues. But at the end of the day, the reading of romance is designed to sort of take you into a different world, and there's an extra layer of that when that different world is geographical as well as social, which I think COVID was a big factor in that fast.
Well, then I agree with Stephanie that you guys will see huge increases in sales in the next few years. So one of the topics that we were supposed to talk about today, we haven't quite gotten to, is the Indigenous aspects of New Zealand that are so strong in all of you and in your writing. And I wonder how growing up there with such a strong identity for the Indigenous peoples affected how you write and how you get their stories out. Go ahead, Esme. I can tell you want to say something.
Yeah. I mean, as I said in my intro, I'm mixed heritage, and I don't speak for all Māori. We three don't speak for all Māori. I am Māori, but I'm white presenting, and I wasn't raised in Te Ao Māori, which means the Māori world. And that's been a big process of reclamation for me. I know that me saying that I'm Māori, but being mixed heritage is confusing for non-New Zealanders. It's confusing for some New Zealanders. And this is a big topic that I'm going to cram in very fast. And there's lots of people who have said this better than me. But basically, the concept of like how much Māori blood is needed for you to be considered Māori is problematic and is flawed. And I've heard Native American and Aboriginal leaders speak on this too. But like blood quantum is a tool of colonization. It's used to prevent community, to prevent solidarity, and ultimately to aid in erasure. And most experts and most Māori consider that if you have Māori whakapapa, if you have Māori ancestry, you are Māori. Personally, I always like to add the context that I'm white presenting, because that's a huge part of who I am and my experience in the world. But I want to kind of talk about, like, so sometimes I think people expect people have expectations on what they want in like Indigenous storytelling, etc. And I'm really passionate about the books that I've written, the male, female romances that I've written are also intended to be queer friendly. Like they're not erasing queer identity or anything in there, even though it's a MF story, then that's really important to me in the same way that even when I'm not writing books that are fully set in Aotearoa New Zealand, if I have a Kiwi character, that's my window in, and that's why you'll find casual use of te reo Māori peppered in. That's why, like, in Eye Candy, Caroline explains that Aotearoa means land of the long white cloud, and that's the heart name, that's the original name. And so, like, when I say kia ora or when I pepper in those words, it's casual, but it's there. And I want people to know that those usages, as casual as they are, like just saying kia ora and greeting you all today by saying kia ora, that's a reclamation. Like that word is survival. That word is there despite like hundreds of years of colonizers trying to kill that language and the people. And that word is there despite oppression. And I mean, my grandmother was beaten for speaking te reo Māori, while my white ancestors were probably off somewhere doing some beating, and I hold this knowledge and this conflict in me. And I want to say that like when I say kia ora, I'm offering you the chance to learn this word and to love this word. And when you do those two things, you help keep that alive. You help protect that taonga, that language. Language is the taonga. Kia kaha te reo Māori. Stay strong te reo Māori.
Thank you. Wow. Anybody want to follow up on that?
I know that's a lot to lay out, but it's a lot that I've been thinking about, and it's very on my heart.
Yeah.
I won't do as good a job. And of course, it's different for me because all of my ancestors were colonizers. We are lucky here in Aotearoa that the process of colonization, despite all of its attempts, never managed to fully eradicate Māori language, Māori culture. And that's very much due to the work and the efforts and the core strength of that. And I know other countries have not been so lucky in the face of that level of oppression. And that's why a lot of Kiwis you'll hear using Aotearoa, because literally the name New Zealand, it's New Zealand. Mm-hmm. It's a New Zealand. So it's a colonizer name. Mm-hmm. And we're lucky in the fact that I think our generation, and particularly the generation below us, I know my children are growing up in schools where te reo is normalized. They are learning it again. They are involved in kapahaka and celebrations such as Matariki, which is like the harvest sort of festival when the stars align in the sky. Other people call it play days. But it's, how do I put it? It's something that we're all raised with, whether we have Māori blood or not, because we're raised in this place and we're raised in this culture, and it's become stronger over the years in the acts of reclamation, which is amazing to see. And despite the efforts of many, many people to reduce that impact and that growth in that area, it's stayed strong and it's continued to grow. And we're at a place now where the expectation of me as a government employee, and I know of other people, is that we are using the language, the culture, the value system to drive our work, because it's understood that it's an integral part. It's the culture of our country, and the other things that have come and been layered on top need to be either anchored by that work or moved past, because it's not served our country well. Mm-hmm. And so I write predominantly Polynesian characters, and Polynesian characters often set in New Zealand, which is a different thing again. Because of course Māori are within the Polynesian banner, but they're different from Pacifica Islanders in terms of many of the ways that they operate, and but it's always there and it's always underlying. And there's an expectation that our characters will use some level of te reo Māori, that our place names are Te Reo Māori. And I also, I think, so the first Māori character I wrote was in Offa's Game, which is Zach, who's a professional rugby league player, and he's part Māori. And he's not in touch with his whakapapa, he's not in touch with his heritage, and he hasn't been doing that work, and he's not comfortable in that space, which is a very important thing, I think, when we talk about how it's impacted our country and our people, is the fact that through the process of colonization and then increased by the urbanization of Māori in the 1960s off their traditional lands, is there's a disconnect in a lot of people. And, you know, Esme's spoken on how that impacts her, but it's also, it's huge. And my stepdaughter is Māori, and she's been exploring that growth. So she's always been Māori, she's always been in things like kohanga, which is a Māori language immersion, childcare and things like that, and seeing how she navigates that, and seeing how people of her generation and my kids' generation, it's so normalized for them, and it's beautiful, because that's not something I had it more than my parents had it more than their parents, but it's still a lot of trauma that exists in the space in the terms of what it's done for our country. And I'm just really grateful that it is getting better, because there was a time there where it could have gone either way, I guess. I feel like I'm not being very articulate, but it's important. It's important to have representation. We know that it's important to have representation of everyone.
Yeah.
And particularly, I think of Indigenous people, when you're writing on their land as a visitor, you know, you respect that and you honor it.
Thank you. Stephanie, how about you?
Yeah, following what the other two said, he tangata te riti aho. So I'm not Māori, I'm not of Māori heritage. He tangata te riti means I am a person who whose ancestors came to this place, and therefore I have an agreement through te tiriti or Waitangi, which is a treaty that was written a long time ago, an agreement, and that's why I feel welcome here. We've had a whole lot of stuff going on recently in our politics, where some rights are trying to be removed from that tiriti. Te tiriti was never fully recognised anyway. So rather than drawing it down, there's a huge movement, and I'm happy to be part of it, to push it actually beyond what it has ever been, to where tino rangatira, which is sovereignty. Yeah. So there's a fine line between representation of diversity and actually appropriation of that, and I'm very aware of that as a Pākehā or a European implant into Aotearoa. So I whānau mai o I Ōtautahi, I was born here, but that doesn't mean I'm of Māori heritage, and so I'm very aware that anything I write that is not of me, for example, any kind of diversity, that I need to really double check my facts. I need to have beta readers who are within that specialized diversity. And so kei te ako au I te reo Māori, I study te reo Māori, and it is amazing when you study a language how you get thrown into that world. So the tikanga, or the rules and regulations of that world, suddenly become apparent. Suddenly everything becomes a lot more, you become a lot more aware of why the culture works the way it does. And I have a great sadness that te ao Māori, the world of Māoridom, was really nearly, as Courtney said, it was nearly wiped. If you take the language from a people, as anyone of First Nations would know. If you take the language from a people, then you can really easily colonize that group. Once you bring the language back, which is what really Te Ao Aotearoa, what the world of Aotearoa is trying to do, is bring that language back so the tikanga can come back. And yeah, there's a real strength in that. And so I do try to include diversity, not just of Māoridom, but of all kinds of peoples within my books. And then I try to back myself with that lack of appropriation by trying to fact check and double check with beta readers and sensitivity readers and check, am I on the right path here?
Mm-hmm.
I want to have Te Reo Māori, the language of Māori, to be normalised within my children's generation. And as Courtney said, in learning, you see that a lot more now. When I was a child, my school was very unusual for having Te Reo Māori spoken and having a kapa haka group, which is kapa haka is, you all know haka, which is I won't do kamate because we're not supposed to do that in Te Waipounamu, which is the South Island, because it's the North Island haka. But kapa haka is a grouping, and it's waiata, which is song, and haka, which is war dancing, and is it a huge group of people come together. It can be a tiny group, a huge group, and you often see this in kura in schools. They'll come together and do this, and it's becoming more and more popular, and we love that. So Māoridom, the old Māoridom before colonisation, is a beautiful thing to learn. And so it's been amazing for me to go on this journey with so many other people on this journey and learning their stories too.
And
so
I would just
go ahead,
yeah, I'd just like to point out that if anyone is unfamiliar, Allegra Hall is a Māori author from Aotearoa writing Māori characters, who is doing some great work in monster romance. So, you know, if you're interested in romance books and you're interested in that, I would really like to shout out Allegra and her work specifically. There are, of course, other Māori authors, other Māori romance authors, but she is the one right now who's really pushing forward with this mahi, with this work. And I'd really encourage everyone to pick up her books.
Will do. We just have another minute or two, and Esme, I thought maybe you could like close out our conversation and talk about, just for a minute, why romance is the best vehicle to really share those voices, the New Zealand voices, the Indigenous voices, with your readership and the world at large.
Courtney and I are on the exact same page there.
Wait. 1 second. It has to be spicy romance. Spicy romance, the best vehicle.
Courtney and I were on the same page there, because I was just about to mention Allegra, because and I see that Sam mentioned in the chat the Te Reo Māori glossary that's been in their anthologies. Allegra has one in her books as well, and she also does a verbal pronunciation guide, so it's really beautiful. Like, it's an oral language, so it's really beautiful to hear it. So I definitely encourage people to check that out. Why spicy romance is it? Look, from my perspective, I view romance with spicy content as an integral for empowerment, for education, for, I don't know, just a good time. And I think that reading, I really read more or less exclusively romance, and then like one nonfiction book every now and again because I know I need to, and then a lot of articles and a lot of news, etc., etc. But like, this genre really does contain everything. It's so broad, it's so vast. There are so many exciting voices, cultures, stories, etc. And being able to sample that and how I see romances is in a safe spaces and safe parameters, because I know that we're going to have an HEA at the end. That for me, as an anxious person, is a safe journey, and that's why I love this genre so much, because I like the surety of knowing the protagonist isn't going to get murdered at the end. There's not going to be, horrific intimate partner, And there are genre subsets that push some of that sometimes, but like that is what I love about romance. And I think that um, Indigenous stories belong in every genre, and romance is one of those genres. And stories about body positivity belong in every genre, including romance. There's no shortage of people doing that. There's some beautiful books in that space. And it's really exciting for us to have the opportunity to add our voices, our lenses, our jokes, our places to that romance oeuvre. That is super borrowed word. That is really exciting to do, and it makes me very happy. And I've learned a lot. You would have noticed this in the journey of the conversation from Steph and Courtney, who are very passionate about Aotearoa and about those stories. And it's really been a process for me, from 13-year-old Jane being like, I have to lie and pretend I'm American in order to write books, to being like, actually, my humor is what I'm best at, I think. That's the thing that I love doing. And I can do that in a way that shares those stories, that plays in the spaces that I want to play in, but is really unique to me. And how lucky and how beautiful is that?
Very lucky, very beautiful. I didn't get to talk about your anthologies, but for anybody who's listening, please check them out. I mean, you guys just interweave stories. Like, I mean, you just pull it together so beautifully, and you can tell your friends just from how wonderfully they're written. So, and Sam is the one that put me onto them, so I appreciate her as well. So thank you so much. I know it's like still middle of the morning for you. Early in the morning, but I feel like I've learned a lot. I hope everybody has enjoyed the conversation, and we'll pick up books by Courtney, Esme, and Stephanie if you haven't already, because they're amazing. Courtney, Stephanie, Esme, thank you so much for spending your morning with us and sharing your thoughts and insights.
Thank you so much for having us, Mina.
Absolutely.
It's been a privilege.
If I ever get there, I am totally looking you all up.
Call us. Yes.
I will. You can't get rid of me. All right. Okay. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you, Bye.
Ka kite, thank you.